Coming to Kindle Unlimited this April, Esteemed Goddess of. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a demonic dominatrix in this all-new Esteemed series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteemed Goddess of on Kindle Unlimited or pick up the paperback today. The blind lead the blind, and this is why the comic book industry is in the ditch it's in right now. I recently watched a Thinking Critical video where he talked about how DC's Vertigo division is now all but dead and gone, and you should subscribe to his channel because he puts out some very thought-provoking content as related to the comic book industry. And after watching your Thinking Critical's video on the DC Vertigo imprint, I began to understand why the overall comic book industry has fallen into a complete ditch. Now, at DC Comics, we have Dan Dido and Jim Lee, two individuals who have no publishing experience running the DC brand. And over at Marvel Comics, we have Sana Amanat, someone who also has no experience in publishing running Marvel Comics. Now, with the two biggest publishers in the comic book industry run by people with no publishing experience, this is the main reason why no one knows how to sell comics. Because when it comes down to Warner Brothers and Disney, these days they have taken the publishing industry for granted, and they don't really understand how important it is to hire someone with publishing experience, because someone with publishing experience understands how to sell books. Now, as I watched Thinking Critical's video where he talked about the complete collapse of the Vertigo imprint, he made the point that the person who they chose to run the Vertigo imprint, Andy Curry, was someone who came from a comic blog. And that may seem on the surface like someone you would want to hire to run a publishing imprint. However, you have to understand that blogging is a completely different trade than trade publishing. Now, in blogging, yes, you are publishing articles on a website and you're trying to generate clicks, which are people coming to the website to read the website. And you primarily get most of your money from the ad revenue you get by putting ads on the website and the clicks you generate from people coming to the website. However, when it comes down to trade publishing, it's a completely different animal, and your Andy Curry didn't understand how trade publishing worked, because the controversy that you generate with blogs and websites, yes, that'll get people's attention and it will get their emotions riled up, but getting people to spend money on your product is a completely different story. So you can go out here and generate a lot of controversy on a website by writing these articles that are inflammatory or talking about things as related to social justice. And yes, you'll get a lot of clicks on your website and you may get some pennies from ad revenue. However, when it comes down to trade publishing, and sales, you have to be able to create content that generates dollars. And a lot of people who are bloggers, they think that they can bring their controversial content to trade publishing. Unfortunately, they find out the hard way, like the Andy Curry and the DC Vertigo brand, that the controversy you generate online does not generate into actual sales, because when it comes down to trade publishing, you have to have a mission for what you want to publish, and you have to have a vision for what you want to publish. And it's clear to me, based on the publications that your Vertigo came out with the relaunch, that your Andy Curry had no vision for the Vertigo brand, as in a 3 to 5 year picture of where he saw the brand going. And he also did not understand the original mission of Vertigo Comics. Now, the original mission of Vertigo Comics was to be a place where talented creators could go out here and explore new concepts as related to the comic medium, new story models, and explore different and unique concepts. And when we had the original Vertigo imprint, it was a place where a lot of creators could go out here and explore more adult themes, more adult content, and that's why they were able to go out here and create classics like the Doom Patrol, the Swamp Thing, the Sandman, and books that like Tom Strong and Preacher, because they weren't being restricted by things like the Comics Code, nor were they being restricted by the rules as related to the genre of superhero comics. So you had talented creators like your Warren Ellis and your many other creators. They were able to go out here and really get creative, really get imaginative, because they weren't being restricted by the rules as related to the genre of superhero comics, and they weren't being restricted by the comics code overall. So those creators could really go out here like Neil Gaiman and your Warren Ellis, and I forget the name of the guy who created Preacher. Oh, Garth Ennis. All these creators could really cut loose, and guys like Chris Sprouse, who was one of the co-creators of Tom Strong, they could really go out here and really explore things. But because the person who they put in charge, Andy Curry, didn't understand the original mission of Vertigo, he just came in thinking that he could use the Vertigo imprint to push a social justice narrative. And that's something that someone would do if they had no publishing experience. Now, someone who has publishing experience like myself, they understand that your mission and your vision are two extremely important things. Now, when I started the SJS Direct imprint, I had the mission, which was creating positive stories about the African American experience and diversifying the African American experience. That was the core mission of my imprint. And my vision for the imprint was to be able to create a catalog of books over the course of when I started in 2009. Over the course of 3 years, I wanted to be able to get the first 3 manuscripts that I had been sitting in my box since about 2005 or 2006. I had like 3 or 4 manuscripts that were sitting in a box. So the original goal was to get those manuscripts published, and I got all those manuscripts published by 2011. Now, in 2011, I began to expand the brand after seeing the critical acclaim of my screenplay, All About Marilyn, and books like The Temptation of John Haynes. And I decided to expand into the ebook marketplace, and that was part of my overall vision to continue expanding. And I started launching with some free ebooks, and I started to see where my audience was coming from. And from there, I started to launch out further. And then in 2012, we had the 10th anniversary of the first ISIS book being published, so I decided to further expand the SJS Direct universe with the Amari's Revenge that started the ISIS series, and I also did the East Team No Good Deed, I believe, at that time as well. And again, all of those things were towards a vision. So the vision was overall related to the mission, which was, again, creating positive stories about the African American experience and diversifying the African American book market. But it was also, as I had my vision, it was 3 to 5 years down the road, I had a plan for building out from existing material. So I took the core foundation of books that I started with, books like You're All About Marilyn, books like The Temptation of John Haynes, and I continued to expand by building on what was already there. And that's how I laid things out for the continuation of the overall vision for the SJS Direct imprint. So all the books that I did came from the older books, and Later on, I started to expand by exploring things like African American sororities with the book The Thetas, and then later on with the character of Spinsterella in 2015, when I went into the African American goth subculture after I'd done several Isis and E-Steam books. And after that, I then started further developing my men's issues books, which I also did around 2011, 2012, when I did the first Stop Simpin'. So I always had a overall plan for what I wanted to do with the publishing imprint, and I set a direction for what I wanted to go with the existing books building into new books, because I understood how comics were sold, and comics are sold with the book in the reader's hand. So if a reader has a book in their hand, your goal with that book is to make that story so compelling that the reader wants to go out and buy the next book. And I used that originally with 2009's All About Marilyn to sell All About Nikki, and All About Nikki sold better than All About Marilyn, becoming an international bestseller. And I also did this with The Temptation of John Haynes, which led into From the Thetas, and which led into the Isis series and the E-Steam series. So I did that with those books, and I also did it with nonfiction, like my men's issues books, where your Stop Simpin', the original Stop Simpin', which is only a 32, 33-page ebook, led into Manginas and The Misadventures of Captain Saberho. So all the books were building momentum on the other books. And that's what happens when you have a cohesive mission for your publishing imprint, and when you have a vision for your publishing imprint. And Vertigo did not have a mission as related to the imprint, and it had no vision as related to the leadership, because this blogger was still trying to use blogging techniques to sell books, and you can't use blogging techniques to sell books. Now, I myself have been a blogger for over 10 years, and over that 10 years, I have had my blog, Shawn James Black Freelance Writer, get over 2 million hits. And I know how to run a successful blog, because at one time I was getting over 5,000 hits a day on my blog, and I was getting hits on my men's issues articles, but I realized that I had gone as far as I could go with that blog, and if I wanted to sell books, I needed to change course, because the content on the blog, yes, it was popular and it generated a lot of controversy, had a lot of people talking on message boards, like when they would talk, they still talk about several of my blogs, like Porn is Fake, Why Real Men Avoid Single Mothers, and blogs talking about why 70% of black women are single, and they still talk about those blogs, but I understand that the controversy that you use to sell a web page and get clicks on a web page are not the same techniques you can use to sell books, because yes, you can generate a lot of controversy on message boards, and some of the blogs I did on comic books, they generated a lot of controversy in the black section of CBR, Comic Book Resources, and other websites, but that did not translate into actual sales of tangible product. No, in order to sell tangible product, you have to have again, with the mission and the vision, but you also have to understand how to go out here and create product that sells to target audiences. And that's also something I learned over the last decade working on the SJS Direct imprint, is that when you're creating a book, you have to have target audiences you want to sell to. And when I look at many of the Vertigo books, there is no target audience. I read books like Your High Level, Your Hex Wives, Your Border Town, and I saw no book there that would appeal to a core audience, because that if you don't have a core audience that you want to target, you're not going to make any money. And that's another thing that people with publishing experience understand, is that you are in this business to make money, and when you launch books, you need to have a plan to make money on these books, because these books, they usually cost anywhere between $25 and $30,000 just to put together. And that's not the printing costs coming in. You're just paying for the artwork, you're paying for the lettering, you're paying for the coloring, and you haven't pulled a profit yet on anything that has been printed or sold. So that's why you have to think about counting the cost before you launch a title. And that's what a good editor-in-chief is going to sit there and think about before they even think about launching a single title, is how much is this book going to cost? Because we need to recoup those costs by having a target audience. And when I look at the books of the Vertigo imprint, I didn't see a single piece of marketing done whatsoever, because none of these books are synergizing to where one book can sell the other book. And I don't see anything as related to a core target audience that these books are going for. Now, when I went out here and I originally did books like All About Marilyn, I started out going for the core audience of black women, and I also went for the audience of screenwriters. The same thing with All About Nikki. I went for the core audience of black women, and I also went for the audience of screenwriters and television writers. So there was an organic transition as related to not only the storytelling, but the audiences. And the same thing with books like The Temptation of John Haynes, where I wanted to go for the African American audience, the Christian audience, and the fantasy audience. So I had 3 core audiences lined up to sell that book, and I had audiences that could synergize with each other when I would do spin-off books like The Thetas, where I started to go for African American women, college students, and college girls. So I had audiences that I wanted to target when I launched those books. And then when I did the ISIS series, I was also going for women, and I was going for young girls and teenage girls. Same thing with the E-Steam series. So I have audiences that I'm targeting, I have audiences I'm planning to reach, and I have an organic direction that I'm going in, so I know which audiences I want to reach, which audiences I want to target, and which audiences I want to appeal to. Same thing with the Spinsterella in 2015. Now, the Spinsterella, I was going for the core audience of African Americans, African American women, and women in the goth subculture. So I went for those 3 audiences as my source audience and my target audience, and then from that audience, I then used that book, Spinsterella, as the springboard to sell Spellbound. And Spellbound, which explored Matilda Crowley's baby bat years, was a stronger seller than Spinsterella, all because I had built the momentum for that book by having a plan to reach core audiences for that product. And I don't see that type of planning being done in the comic book industry as relates to publishing, and that can be shown as related to the overall sales numbers, because the orders for many of these books is low, and they continue to decline because many of the people in the comic book industry, they are blind, they're throwing crap at a wall and hoping something sticks, and that's not what a seasoned publisher does, because a seasoned publisher knows that their resources are limited. They can't afford to spend money haphazardly, even with a corporate backer like Disney or Warner Brothers, or in the case of IDW right now, the reason why they're hemorrhaging cash is because they don't have a core plan for how they want to spend money, and they don't have a core plan for how they want to direct the brand. Now, when I'm doing my direction for the brand, again, I have products that I want to produce, but I also understand that I have to have core audiences that I can appeal to, so that I can target the product, so that there's a group of readers there that will come out and try the product and possibly give that product word of mouth. Because anybody with publishing experience knows that 90% of all books fail within the first 6 months of publication. So you have to make sure that the 10% of books that you put out there are able to sell strongly and be able to recoup the loss on the 90% that fail. So that's something I didn't see being done at Vertigo with this Andy Curry, who again has no publishing experience. And I also didn't see it with your Dan Dido and your Jim Lee, who also came into the industry with no publishing experience. Your Dan Dido was an executive brought in. Yes, he had executive experience, but he did not have publishing experience, and that's why the DC brand declined under his leadership. And your Jim Lee, who also has no publishing experience really except outside of Wildstorm, which is a bank company that went bankrupt because he didn't understand how to do product. This is why his company failed. So I see where the problem lies in the comic book industry, because you have people who have no publishing experience coming in here, and what they're doing is hiring people who have no experience, and that's showing on the pages of their books. Because when I look at the whole decline of Vertigo that Thinking Critical was talking about, your Andy Curry, you have this blogger, he's coming in, he's going to talk about he's going to start publishing comics, and then he goes out and hires people with no real publishing experience, no experience writing comics, and they're coming in with all of these emotional ideas, but because there's no editor-in-chief with a mission and a vision, there's nobody there to vet those ideas, and there's nobody there to let these people know that what they want to put in publish is not going to be saleable in a commercial book market, because you might have these ideas as related to social justice and identity politics. However, in a commercial market, you have to have a product that the customer wants to buy. And when it came down to the Vertigo imprint, they didn't have any product that the customer wanted to buy. I mean, I looked at that Border Town book, and it had no direction whatsoever. It was supposed to be about these chupacabras and supposed to be horror themed, but everything got lost in the social justice. The Hexwives book was a complete mess with factual inaccuracies, characters that were horribly underdeveloped, and no real story outside of the whole kill all men, misandristic feminist narrative. And other books like your High Level with the apocalyptic storyline went nowhere. And your Second Coming was dead before it even started. And your Second Coming was this close to collapsing the entire DC Comics brand with its blasphemous storyline and its blasphemous narrative. So all of these comics, yes, they generated a lot of controversy and they got people talking on message boards, but they did not make any headway towards generating any revenue for the Vertigo imprint. So I look at that part of things, and that's where I see why why the whole brand fell completely apart. Because when you have the Blind, which is Dan Dido and Jim Lee, leading the Blind, which is your Andy Curry, they go out here and hire more blind people, like the creators of books like Border Town and your Hexwives and your books like your High Level and many others that were a part of the failed Vertigo relaunch. And these people have no experience in anything as related to writing, as related to publishing, and because they don't understand the crafts of those businesses, that's why this iconic Vertigo imprint is all but dead right now, and why DC Comics is dying as we speak. People will sit there and complain about the whole social justice angle as related to DC Comics or Marvel Comics, but the big problem is the industry has too many people working in it who have no understanding of the business of publishing. And when you understand the business of publishing, you can then start understanding why things are the way they are, because People who have a mission for their publishing imprint can then set a vision for what they want to publish, set a 3 to 5 year plan for what they want to publish, and then set a direction for where they want to take the imprint overall. And when you have that mission and that vision, when people come to you proposing a book that, like a Hex Wives or a book like a Border Town, the editor-in-chief can come to you and tell you this book does not fit the mission of this publishing imprint. It does not fit the overall vision for this publishing imprint, nor does it fit the direction for this publishing imprint. And they will be able to pass on those projects rather than spend precious resources publishing them. And when they hear about projects like A Second Coming, which blasphemes the Son of God and makes a mockery of the religion of God, that publisher is going to take a look at it and say, we have to pass on this because this project is bad for the overall brand of the imprint and is bad for the overall brand as related to Warner Brothers. So that's what a seasoned publisher is going to tell someone who comes to them talking about these ideas as related to social justice and identity politics. They are going to give them a hard lesson in business. And after they give them that hard lesson in business, then they can understand why this publisher isn't going to publish those books. Because that was the big problem I saw with the Vertigo relaunch, was no vision, no mission, and no direction. And I see the same thing going on in the comic book industry. There's no mission, no vision, and no direction. And that's why this comic book industry is a group of blind leading the blind. And that's why the overall industry has fallen completely into a ditch. I'm running an Indiegogo to publish the first ISIS graphic novel. And if you could put in a pledge, you could help me publish the first comic book featuring the goddess next door. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon or my PayPal by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, All That Glitters. The goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, All That Glitters in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.